Hey everyone, welcome to our latest episode of The Pudding Process. This is Amber speaking, and I'm here today with Russell.
Hello.
Hey. And we're going to be talking about one of Russell's newest projects about the top plays in the NBA. So, Russell, do you want to give us a quick run through of the story for anybody who hasn't seen it yet?
I should probably pull it up because this is actually the wrong one.
That's okay. We can take
So
a
yeah,
quick view of the homepage.
so their homepage. So yeah, it's a very straightforward story. It's synthesized right there in about 2 sentences. But basically, I scraped all the top plays on Reddit from the NBA for the season, and I compiled essentially an interactive video of all those plays, so you could basically recap the season through this little experience. So to give you a taste of what that looks like, you've got the play playing, and then you've got some metadata down below about the views, when it happened, a little synopsis of the play, and then you can go through it and jump around, or you can just sit back, relax, and watch the plays. And there's two versions. There's chronological, so you can kind of watch the season from start to finish, or you can switch over to the most viewed, and it'll be more like a best to worst. So yeah, that's the experience in a nutshell.
Awesome. Do you want to give us a little bit of background on why you decided to do this project?
Yeah, so it initially started as just an exercise for myself to learn Bash scripting. So let me switch over here. So I took a couple days to familiarize myself with this slightly esoteric scripting language, but it's super powerful and not very utilized in data analysis. But you can do anything with it. So I just wanted to see what I could do with it in the realm of data collection and processing. So I figured I started with Reddit. I go to Reddit MBA every morning, and I decided to write some scripts. And this was like I wanted to learn this stuff through application. So this was my little example, which is to scrape the top plays that had the top posts on Reddit MBA that had videos every day, and essentially kind of compile this little database. So you can see my first foray into this. So this script right here is uh, simply, if I remember correctly, it's hitting the Reddit API, passing a couple parameters, and then parsing the results and storing them to a JSON file or a CSV file, it looks like. And that was really the only intention initially. That turned into me actually starting to post once a week to Reddit of like this, in case you missed it, here are the top 30 plays from each week. And this was also all automated, so it would generate the Reddit post and put it up. So my goal was to like just totally automate this. And it mostly worked. It didn't get a lot of love, so I did this for a couple of weeks and then stopped. Um, and then I think so the season started in October, and then maybe 2 months ago, I mentioned that I was still collecting the data, and our fellow teammate Matt was like really interested in it, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll just build like some visual interface for the data I've been collecting. So that's how it came to its current state.
Whew, that was quite the journey.
Sorry,
So
that was a long-winded explanation.
no, it's great. And you touched on some interesting things. So you mentioned that like you decided to sort of do this project in an effort to learn Bash and sort of a new scripting language, which is such a fun way to learn something new. And in my opinion, rather than going out and being like, I'm going to learn Bash, you're like, I'm going to learn Bash by pulling a bunch of stuff from Reddit. So having a goal, do you think that helped you in learning how to use this?
100%. I think if I don't have like an actual objective, it's just not going to stick. And I think also when learning something new, you don't like, it's great to go over like the, token examples and like these little dummy exercises, but like you really learn the ins and outs in a language when you have to actually problem solve. And so I was like, oh, I need to know how to do X, Y, or Z. I have to like look up the documentation and actually figure it out because it's never as like cookie cutter as like doing a little example with dummy data. So it was
Totally.
definitely helpful doing it this way for sure.
Nice. And then you mentioned that this was automated and it's been running for a while now. How long has this script been running automatically?
So it was running. So I just used I think it's called like the automation, or no, it was just like the scheduler
Mhm.
application in Mac. So actually, like a couple times a day at like certain times, it would trigger this script to run. Um, However, the Reddit API changed like about a month or two ago when they did the site redesign. So I actually had to completely rewrite it to get the last couple weeks of the season. And I went back to, actually, it's right here. I ended up using a Node script, and I actually just manually ran this, once a week to kind of backtrace and get posts that I missed. But they basically just pulled down the actual HTML and parsed it with a Node script and using Cheerio, which is like an HTML parser in Node. So it was running flawlessly for like a couple months, and then this was for like another month.
So did you recognize that your script was about to run into an issue when Reddit did a page redesign, or did you have some sort of like error catching mechanism on your script that alerted you that it wasn't working anymore?
I wish I could say I built that in, but I completely let this go. And then I checked in on the data after I mentioned, this in a story time or when we did like talked about possible story ideas.
Mhm.
And I looked at like the most recent data and it was just blank. So I was like, shoot, something happened. So then I investigated and found out that the Reddit API was basically deprecated.
Gotcha. Doesn't that always seem to happen right before you want to use everything? You're like, oh, I missed stuff. But you were able to go back and collect the data that your scraper had missed.
Yeah, luckily Reddit, you can just do some like actual searches on Reddit itself for like the past like month of posts, and because I wasn't looking for comprehensive results, I was only looking for like the most viewed plays. I was able to get everything I needed.
Nice. Okay, well that's good. I'm glad that worked out.
Me too.
Cool. Okay. So, you mentioned a little bit that this story is pretty straightforward and it has like just a couple sentences of prose. And um, why did you decide to do the story this way? Why is it so different from like a story you would normally see on the pudding?
Yeah, so people usually say like always design with like an audience in mind. We Generally speaking, I design for myself. I try to create a story that I'd be interested in reading. And this one I actually had a very, very targeted audience, which again was Matt, our coworker. And he basically wanted to like a way to recap the season. And I was like, oh, let me build this for him. So um, that's why it ended up this way. We could have had a few more bells and whistles, and I could have gone a lot crazier with it. But at the end, it was really just about watching the plays, and all the interestingness from a development standpoint was really just actually acquiring the data and figuring out what is the most interesting place to show. So this was very atypical of stories I usually work on, right? Because usually it's about lots of interactivity and the end product. But I mean, this is, for lack of a better term, this was pretty superficial. So there's not really I don't think there's any insight to be gained from like going deep into the data here.
Totally. And you mentioned this being really different than the stories you normally work on. And one of the most obvious instances of that, I think, is that there's no like traditional data visualization in this story. It's literally just video. But this story is still data driven. So it's kind of an interesting combination there.
Yeah, I guess you could call it a very glorified listicle.
Yeah, but it's a little fancier, and listicles sometimes don't actually have data behind them. They're just like 10 things
This is true.
you might enjoy. So this was really great. So what was the design process like for this?
Yeah, so I had this thing up before. So Matt and I worked on a story last year. It was a project we did with Google, which is very similar, but with a completely different data set. So it was looking at like all the top moments, not necessarily plays in NBA history using YouTube. So this one was definitely more data centric. But it was the same kind of spirit. It was being able to watch a bunch of basketball plays with like this entry point of data. And so design-wise, I remember we actually had a whole bunch of different mockups. So I'll just scroll. Oh, this is not it. But actually, this is very different than what you see. We had a whole bunch of different mockups that I wanted to that we didn't get a chance to explore that I thought might be more fitting for this Reddit NBA play project. So I decided to just kind of make some prototypes based on these mockups that never saw the light of day. And let me see if it's running, because I actually went straight to code, which I tend to do, and it's not popular on the team. But let's see if this is working.
Well, while you're pulling that up, that's an interesting point. So for anybody listening who may not be sort of familiar with the rest of our team's like process, we all kind of have our own workflow here. And personally, I always go to like a static mock-up of something first, because I'm still like a little slow with coding. So if I decide to do something one way and spend like a full day programming it and then decide it's a bad idea, like I've just lost a whole day, whereas it would have taken like 5 minutes to to mock it up. But Russell's a much faster programmer than I am. So he jumps right into the code. Is there any other reason you go straight into code sometimes?
I'm just not good at designing. Yeah, so like I'm not good at like picturing it without implementing it. I think that's part of it.
Totally. So I mean, both totally fair ways. Anybody who's listening and wants to figure out the process, we kind of all just do what works best for us. So anyway, it looks like you've got a prototype pulled up here.
Yeah, so I basically, like I said, there was a few different things that I wanted to try. I was like, oh, maybe I'll try this thing where it's more giving more real estate to the actual description of what's happening, and have this scroll driven thing where you can just go through and the plays toggle. And then I had this other one, which is much more similar to what I currently have. But it's like it's even more passive. Like you couldn't do anything. It's just like a video playing and it's full screen. And this was really kind of the one that I morphed into what I currently have. The difference is this is all using HTML5 video, and had to do all my own like loading and of the video and figuring out all that stuff. And if you notice, the actual end result is a YouTube video, which I guess I can talk about why I made that switch.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyways, those were like the prototypes. And again, there's only one component, so it's not like there was a whole bunch of iterating. There was only so much to change, right, with a video and some text.
Totally.
So I ended up going with the YouTube video for a couple of reasons. One, self-hosting and managing like the loading progress of HTML5 video is much more cumbersome than externalizing that. So that's literally what YouTube does, right, is video. So they have an API. So I thought it made more sense to just create a single video, have it hosted on YouTube, and just tap into the API, which would just tell me, what I basically could just map my data files, which I knew when the video started and ended, and I knew what the current progress in this video was, and so it can just kind of sync the text and the video together. And it ended up being much more seamless because YouTube has way better algorithms for like loading and buffering and all that stuff. Not to mention, it is also now a standalone video. So if someone wants to just watch it on YouTube, then that's a plus. So it doesn't have to be viewed just inside of this experience.
Gotcha. So it definitely gives you some more flexibility. For anybody listening, Russell, you did live stream working on this when it was HTML5 video, correct?
I did. So I did get into like the nuances of it. And it's not that it's difficult per se. It gets much more complicated when you're dealing with, I think there's like 60 videos here. Mm-hmm. So there's just lots of things like you can't, start playing it until a certain amount has loaded. And then like, what do you do if it, is buffering, and you have to kind of handle all of that stuff. But I did implement it pretty much fully in HTML5 video before I switched over.
Gotcha. So we can include the link to that in the description of this video in case anybody wants to check it out. But the final product is YouTube hosted. So really cool. Awesome. So in this project, did you have a favorite part of like either the end result or the process, or what did you really enjoy about this?
Um, my favorite part, oh, there's a few favorite parts. I love basketball, so I got to just constantly watch these basketball videos. Like I edited each one because some of them just had like too much on either side.
Mhm.
So I watched a lot of basketball footage. Um, and then my favorite and least favorite parts are actually coupled. I don't even think you asked least favorite part,
That's
but
okay.
they go together. I did most of the video work using FFmpeg, which is a command line tool for working with video and audio. And basically, I could script everything. So I had a CSV file that looks like this, and in it, the only thing I manually had to do was enter start and stop times because I wanted to like truncate the videos.
Mhm.
Um, so in a script I wrote, it basically utilized FFmpeg to trim the videos down, and then I had this grand plan to just concatenate them all.
Mhm.
So I did resizing with FFmpeg as well because all the videos were different sizes.
Sure.
Long story short, there's lots of issues with videos having like different codecs, and for some reason I couldn't quite put all 60 videos together where like and frame rates and all that stuff, so it just didn't quite work out. So it took me, I definitely tried to force the FFmpeg thing for too long, and I got super frustrated, and I was like, wait, let me just like try iMovie. So actually I ended up let's see, I have this here somewhere. I ended up just like putting all the videos in here, dropping them all on the timeline. It put a little transition, which actually was way nicer than a hard cut between each video. And that totally worked. And the only thing I had to do on my end was name the files so that when I dropped them in here, they would appear in the exact order I needed. So all the files were like named with either timestamps or like views. So they were in the exact order I wanted them. So they would sync up with the CSV file. So anyways, that was my favorite part is when I dropped it in and the video was done in 2 seconds and looked better than the thing I was going to create. So sometimes it makes way more sense to use pre-existing tools than try to write them yourself.
Totally. Well, now if you ever need to use, your command line tool for other types of video, you know how to do it. Install frame
I
rate
do.
and whatnot. But now you also know iMovie is probably a good
iMovie is definitely underrated,
good.
or I definitely undervalued it.
Yeah, I feel like it's come a long way. So, um, I guess my last question you might have already answered, but just in case you have were there other implementation challenges that you ran into beyond the HTML5 video and like the concatenating of all the videos together?
um, No, not really. I think just working with the YouTube API. So there's no way to have like an exact moment when like I say, okay, this thing happened, so now trigger this thing to happen.
Mm.
I think you can actually with what's the library called Popcorn JS. Now that I think about it, but that was probably the biggest challenge, making sure they're perfectly synced, which wasn't too challenging because I basically just wrote a function on request animation frame that would just be checking the progress of the video, and then it would just have to, figure out the offset of how far along the video was and coordinate that with the plays in order. So I could basically vice versa, so you can jump ahead on the video and it'll jump ahead down on the plays. And likewise, if you change a play down here when it's playing, it will jump ahead the video. So that was just a little bit of like coercing, but it wasn't too much of a problem.
Cool. And I actually just realized I don't think I've ever looked at the mobile experience of this. Did you have to do anything special for mobile?
No, that was the nice thing. But I mean, I resized the video pretty much to make sure it fits. But you can see the only difference is I tweaked the design, the style of this, so you have like a little bit of this like blurry overflow to know that there's another play coming. But actually, it's exactly the same on mobile, which is nice.
It's always nice when it works out that way.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about this project that we haven't talked about yet?
I don't think so. It was, I guess if you're curious, I believe the code is up on our new pudding repo. So it's under NBA Top Plays. So if you're interested in any of the front end implementation, I don't have the data collection part because that got really messy with the two different sources. But all the JavaScript for how I worked with the YouTube API is specifically in this youtube.js file. So if you're curious how you can do stuff with the YouTube API, you can definitely check this out.
Awesome. So we can include a link to that in the description of this video as well for anybody who is interested.
Yes, we can. And that's all.
Great. Awesome. Well, Russell, thank you for chatting about this project.
Anytime.
And thanks everybody for listening. If you've got any questions, hit us up, email, Twitter. If you're obviously watching this, you're one of our patrons, so hit us up on the Friends of the Pudding Slack channel, and we will see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Amber.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.